of amber and clear. Then we're going to open the hood. Come around to the passenger side. I want to look at my overview of all my hoses to make sure they're all properly mounted and secured. They're properly coupled, none are leaking. I'm going to look at my alternator to make sure it's properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or loose. All of my electrical connectors are connected. They're not worn, torn, or frayed. My alternator is belt driven. I'm going to make sure I have no more than 3/4 inch play on my belt and it's not worn, torn, or frayed. All right, then we're going to go around to the driver's side of the vehicle. We're going to start at the top. This is our coolant reservoir. Make sure it's properly mounted and secured. The cap is on tight. It's not cracked, damaged, or loose, and it is not leaking. Our hose going to our coolant reservoir is properly coupled, not worn, torn, or frayed, and it is not leaking. Our water pump, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or loose. It is also belt driven. We want to make sure that the belt has no more than 3/4 inch play. It's not worn, torn, or frayed, and my water pump is not leaking. I would check the oil by pulling the dipstick out, wiping it off, reinserting it, and make sure it's above the refill mark. Our air compressor, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or loose. It is gear driven. It is not leaking. I hear no audible leaks. My power steering pump, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or loose. It's not leaking, and it is also gear driven. My power steering reservoir, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or loose. It is not leaking. The hoses going from my power steering reservoir to my steering gearbox are properly coupled. They're not worn, torn, or frayed, and they are not leaking. My gearbox, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or loose. It is not leaking. My steering linkage, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or loose. All castle nuts and cotter keys are in place. My spring mounts, front and back spring mounts, are properly mounted and secured. They're not cracked, damaged, or loose. My springs, the leaf springs themselves, are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or loose. No signs of scissoring, missing leaf springs. My U-bolts, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or loose. All my bolts up underneath my U-bolts are tight. My shock absorber, properly mounted and secured. Top and bottom mounts are properly mounted and secured. My shock itself is not cracked, damaged, or loose, and it is not leaking. My air hose going to my brake chamber, properly mounted and secured. Not worn, torn, or frayed. It is not leaking. I hear no audible leaks. My brake chamber itself, properly mounted and secured. Not cracked, damaged, or loose. It is not leaking. My band and my clamp are tight around the brake chamber. My rotor disc brakes are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or loose, no signs of bluing, and my pads are not worn dangerously thin. I'm going to check my tire to make sure we have at least 4/32 tread depth on the steer tires. The overall condition of my tires, they're no abrasions, bulges, or cuts, and I would check my inflation with an air gauge. My rims, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or loose, no illegal welds. My lug nuts are all present. None are missing or loose. Signs of a loose lug nut would be shiny threads or rust runs. My axle seals, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or loose, and it is not leaking and is filled to the proper operating level. My marker light, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or loose. It is the proper color of amber. My mirror, all bolts are in place. It is properly mounted and secured. My lenses are clean, free of debris or stickers. My door opens and closes properly, as it should. My weather seal around my door and the frame are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or loose. And my hinges are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or loose. My steps, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or loose. No foreign objects or debris. That would be a slipping or tripping hazard. My fuel tank, properly mounted and secured. The straps are tight. The rubber seals are in place. It's not cracked, damaged, or loose. It is not leaking. I see no leaks and I smell no diesel fuel. My cap is secure, and on the inside I have a chain and a rubber grommet. My catwalk, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or loose, no foreign objects or debris that would be a slipping or tripping hazard. My drive shaft, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or loose. My exhaust system runs right beside my drive shaft, is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or loose, no signs of soot which would indicate that I had a leaking exhaust system. My torsion bar, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or loose, all bolts are in place. My front and rear leaf spring hanger, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or loose. My leaf spring itself is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or loose. My U-bolt, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or loose. All of my bolts underneath are present and tight. My shock absorber, top and bottom mounts, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or loose. The shock absorber itself is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or loose, and it is not leaking. My air line that runs to my brake chambers, properly coupled, not worn, torn, or frayed. I hear no audible leaks. My air chamber itself, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or loose. The band and clamp is tight around the air chamber and it is not leaking. My rotor, brakes, and disc are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or loose, and my pads are not worn dangerously thin. The tire, minimum 2/32 tread depth on rear tires. Overall condition, no abrasions, no bulges, no cuts, and I would check my inflation with an air gauge. My rim, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or loose, no illegal welds. My lug nuts are all present, none are missing, none are loose. A sign of a loose lug nut would be shiny threads or rust runs. My axle seal, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or loose. Filled to the proper operating level and it is not leaking. My airbag, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or loose. Top and bottom air mounts are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or loose. My airbag is not leaking. My mud flap, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or loose. My DOT reflective tape is all present, clean, clear. My mud flap, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or loose, the proper height from the ground. My brake lights, tail lights, turn signals, and reflectors are all properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or loose, and they are the proper color of red to the rear.